Welcome back to Senate Education. We're going to continue our conversation now on teacher education with the Dean of the University of Vermont College of Education and Social Services, Professor Katie Shepherd. And so I see, and the chair of the department, Professor Kimberly Benest. We really appreciate the two of you being with us. What we are trying to just get our heads around is what does it look like to become a teacher here in the state of Vermont? We just heard from our state colleges what their programs look like, and we wanted to hear from the university as well a little bit of what that path is from arrival to graduation. We've also heard, it's not anecdotal, we've heard nationwide statistics that fewer people are going into the profession. We'd like to hear what the university is seeing, if that is true. It doesn't seem to be true with our state colleges. Sounds like applications are pretty robust. And then a little bit around elementary school teacher versus secondary school teacher, and then special ed. So with that, I know you have some prepared testimony, which we have in front of us, and we'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share with you what we're doing at the University of Vermont, and also I think to engage in potentially a longer term conversation about the issues that you're raising, including how it is that we're preparing our educators and how we might approach what we do see in the field as a growing teacher shortage. And I'll come back to the issue of what we're seeing in terms of applications at UVM. We're, like the state colleges, we're holding pretty stable in terms of applications and interest. And we have a few concerns that I'll share a little bit later. The prompt we received did ask us to give you a bit of an overview of teacher preparation, and then maybe to touch more specifically on preparation as it relates to literacy across the different grade levels and bands. So that's where we'll start, and then we'll be glad to take questions at the end. We're really interested in what you're hearing and seeing and wondering about as well. So again, thanks for having us here. And I should start before we start that both Kimber and I are special educators by training. So we happen to be in leadership positions, but we both come from the field of special education. And I started my career as a special educator at the Duxbury Elementary School in Duxbury, Vermont, which of course no longer exists. So perhaps that dates me a bit, but anyway, those are my roots. And those are important to me as we think about teacher education. So to start just at the big picture level, UVM does provide state and nationally accredited teacher education programs. We're the only nationally accredited program in Vermont. We're accredited by the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation. And at the undergraduate level, we have a number of licensure programs across pre-K through 12. So those include early childhood education, elementary education, middle level education, and secondary education. We also offer some additional licensure pathways through a minor in education for cultural and linguistic diversity. And then we have accelerated master's programs into special education, and that includes both early childhood special education and K-12 special education. We are also well on our way to developing a new major in special education, which we've not had before, and that will cover PK through 12 with options for students to specialize at different grade bands. So we're very, very excited about that. Our graduate level programs include programs in special education, reading and literacy, ed technology, school library, and media science, to name our primary ones. And then we have a couple of graduate level certificate programs, many of which are accessed by teachers, though they don't lead to licensure. And those are our resiliency-based approaches certificate and our education for sustainability certificate. Then we have a set of master's and doctoral programs. Again, these are not only accessed by teacher educators, but they are accessed by some teachers, and they certainly help to build our leadership pathways in Vermont. So those include a master's degree in educational leadership, a doctoral program in educational leadership and policy studies, and a brand new PhD that we'll be launching this fall in social, emotional, behavioral health and inclusive education. So, what does it look like? When our students come in, they are taking typically a set of core courses for their first year. So, and we're actually in the middle of revamping and revising and updating our core courses, but those core courses bring together all of our teacher education candidates. So regardless of which major they intend to pursue or claim at the time of admittance or may transfer into after a while, they do get some common content and curriculum. So they currently are all taking a course having to do with students with disabilities, as well as a course that talks about multilingual learners and related race and racism issues. Once students leave and along with the core courses in our college, first year students are taking a range of distribution requirements across the university. So the majority of our students will try to satisfy a lot of those general ed requirements in their first couple of years so that they increasingly focus on their education courses. So our students take approximately a third of their courses outside of the College of Education and Social Services. And we believe this really contributes to them being well-rounded students, as well as students who develop expertise in particular content areas, which of course is really important for our secondary ed students. All of our licensure programs include multiple practicum opportunities, so shorter term experiences in schools, as well as an intensive semester long, so that's 13 weeks, student teaching experience in a school. Some of those schools are here near us in Burlington and Winooski and surrounding communities, and then we have students placed out in areas such as Mount Abraham, the Bristol area, Waterbury, and further beyond that. And we're very proud of our relationships with our school partners. We've hired over the past few years someone whose sole role is to develop those partnerships and really take a look at our placements and make sure they're very high quality. So our students, in order to become licensed, they complete all the course and internship requirements that I've just described. Additionally, they need to pass the Vermont licensure portfolio, which I'm sure you're well aware of, and demonstrate satisfactory performance on measures such as the Praxis or the Praxis Core. We do have a rather significant number of students who come from out of state. So that's just an important thing to remember about our programs. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of our students are out-of-state students. That's a lower level than the university as a whole. But that's important for us because we do need to pay attention also to other standardized assessments that they may need to take in other states. So we're attentive to that and have a director of teacher licensure who helps with that, keeping track of all of that. So on to a little bit more about literacy and how that works, how we're preparing our teachers to engage PK through 12 students in all forms of literacy. Once students have taken the core courses I described earlier, they do begin to specialize according to the grade or age level that they're working with. So of course, our students in early education will learn different techniques and strategies around literacy than those who are secondary ed students. But I think across all of those programs, we emphasize the use of evidence-based programs. We pay a lot of attention to ensuring that our students can differentiate between what constitutes an evidence-based program or intervention as compared to a program that may not have a robust research base.
Professor Shepherd, I just want to interrupt for a moment. Senator Gulick has a question.
Sure.
Hi, yeah, thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about literacy.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the Vermont Literacy Advisory Council, and we've been talking a lot about literacy in here, and I know the House is also talking about literacy. and I know I'm bringing up a potential can of worms, but there seems to be a general sense that whole language instruction hasn't been super successful. And when you look at our literacy scores, they're not great. And one of the things we heard over and over again from teachers is, I haven't been trained in how to teach phonics. I don't know how to teach phonics. And we know that that is a method that is, as you said, evidence-based and seems to be quite successful. I'm wondering if at the college level, in terms of teacher training, is there more training now, or will there be around phonics instruction?
I would answer yes to both of your questions. I believe there is more now, and it is something we're looking at. And, you know, Dr. Van Esten and I are both, as I said, special educators by training, which means as part of our training, we both are well-versed in phonetically based and structured language approaches to teaching literacy. So that's something that's very much on our minds. And where I was heading with the different levels, I would say it is the case currently that our students in early education and elementary education are getting probably a larger dose of those approaches to reading than we could guarantee for our middle and secondary level students. Partly that's because of the reading demands that are in front of kids depending on what age level they're at. So obviously, early reading, foundational literacy, those phonetics-based approaches are going to be more critical at the early education and elementary school level. But that said, we certainly know that not all students acquire those skills. And so we are very much focused on particularly our students who are identified, pre-K through 12 students who identify as having a disability. We're very much attuned to preparing our teachers to address those needs. So I would say what is true at this time is that our students who also specialize in special education will get more content area around structured language and literacy programs, including phonics-based instruction. Whereas our students at the secondary level are tending to engage with literacy approaches that are more discipline focused. So we are introducing, I would say, everyone to a broad set of skills and understandings of different approaches to teaching reading, but we are not, we could probably find some differences across grade levels in how those play out. I want to mention.
Thank you. And I just wanted to reiterate, and I know you know this, but it seems like it's true that reading phonics instruction should not be limited to students who have special education needs and should be available to all students, because we know that not all students will learn in the whole language model. So I just
Yes.
want to make that plug. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate that point, and I agree. And I think, you know, we are concerned about the gaps that we see in performance in our Vermont students and nationally. And we're, you know, especially concerned because those gaps tend to differentially affect students with disabilities, students who experience poverty, and to some extent multilingual students. So we are very concerned about this, and I think we're interested in engaging in this conversation. And we've had a few conversations, not lots yet, but we are aware of the bill that's being prepared at the House level. So I'll just say a couple more things maybe about literacy. So your point is very well taken. I think it's also important to say that we do think about not so much whole language, but a holistic approach to literacy. So we are thinking about, for example, our multilingual learners may need some different strategies than students whose first language is English. We also do talk a lot with our students about the ways in which socioeconomic status, culture, language play into literacy development for all students. And to some degree, sometimes that means those students have assets that, for example, multilingual students have some assets that single language students don't have. But we are asking our students to think about how a student's background and culture and home life also affects their literacy approaches, skills, and acquisition levels. And again, as our students go up into the upper levels, middle and secondary levels, in addition to literacy and making sure that all students can actually read at the word and sentence and paragraph level and so on, we are also talking about approaches that emphasize motivation, executive functioning, and again, these critical and sociocultural views of reading. So I think that is important to know. And yes, I agree with you that you have to learn, you have to be able to access any kind of text in order to become a very critical reader, or a reader who can comprehend very complex text. And one last word on, sorry, I missed one point of my points. One last word on our multilingual learners. We do ensure that our students who pursue our minor in cultural and linguistic diversity take a course in reading and writing that emphasizes the WIDA standards that apply to those multilingual learners. So I think, again, I just want to emphasize that we are attuned to, increasingly so, really making sure that all of our teacher education candidates, as well as our leadership candidates, you know, have a deep knowledge of what evidence-based approaches mean, how something is deemed to be an evidence-based approach, and to some degree, how our new teachers can learn how to approach perhaps a teacher in a classroom or a school-wide approach that doesn't appear to have a good evidence base. So one thing that I think we all need to think about with you all is there are many things we do at the pre-service level or when students come back to us for graduate education. But as you mentioned, I think in your opening statement, we've also got to think about what's going on in our schools and how we bring professional development to current teachers, which in turn helps our new teachers practice in the very best ways possible. And we do, you know, along those lines, another piece we are try to expose our students to and have them placed in schools where this is prevalent. We're interested in having students understand Vermont's practice of the use of multi-tiered systems of support, and have them understand how, if you've got a student who's struggling to read in your classroom, and who are the people that can help you, what kinds of interventions are helpful, how do those interventions get delivered, let's say for an older student who still needs a more direct or explicit instructional approach. So I think I'm getting close to the end of what I wanted to say, but I do think it's important for you to know that we are concerned about teacher shortages. One of the things, and Kimber can talk more about this, we have been partnering with the Agency of Education, with the state colleges, and with some of our local administrators around the teacher shortage issue in Vermont, particularly around special education teacher shortages. And one example of that is Vermont has become a technical assistance site for a federally funded project called CEDAR, CEEDAR. I won't be able to give you the full acronym, but it's Collaborative and Effective Teacher Education. But that technical assistance project has brought us some resources, has brought us to the table with our partners in the state system. And I think that's been a really exciting opportunity. And the Vermont Higher Education Collaborative is included in that as well. And so we are trying to be creative in thinking about how we can address teacher shortages, provide necessary coursework for teachers who may be on provisional licenses, and do that in a way that, you know, makes it possible for those who are interested in becoming teachers in Vermont to do so efficiently without sacrificing quality. So that's another sort of area that we are paying attention to.
It's not the university's responsibility, like it isn't Middlebury's or Bennington's or St. Mike's, but I am curious, how much is the university in our public schools? You know, I mean, I love, we see in Boston and other cities, sometimes universities are really in our schools. And I understand that you're in the schools by educating our teachers, etc. But it could be argued, I'm not making the argument, but any school around the University of Vermont, this incredible institution of higher education, should be top notch because of the access, the standards, the access, the rigor, just the power, if you will, of the university, the ability to educate people. I'm not being as articulate as I'd like to be, but I think you get a sense of what I'm trying to get at in the United. It'd be like, what's the elementary school next to Harvard University? If it's not doing well, I think we should ask Harvard to get a little bit more involved.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll let Kimber answer part of this question. I'll just start us off by saying, absolutely, we're obviously quite deeply engaged with the schools where we have student teachers who are placed in those settings. We also have a number of engaged research projects that are in our local schools as well as in some of our rural schools, but we have many opportunities to expand those partnerships. And one of the things I think is really exciting about where UVM is as an institution is I think our current administration has really emphasized our land grant mission and is challenging all of the deans, frankly, not just me, but all of the deans to think about what are the partnerships we're creating outside of Chittenden County in particular. And so you've probably seen news of the new Institute for Rural Partnerships that's been established at the university. This will offer us some new ways and some new resources that I believe will help us do a better job of partnering with our schools across the state. I also think that as a new dean, I'm very interested in thinking about how we can partner with UVM's 11 extension offices, because again, we are in some parts of the state, but we're not as ubiquitous as we should be. So I do believe there are lots of opportunities, and I couldn't agree more. It's core to the university's mission. And, what we do as a college, to me, is one of the most important things that goes on. So we need to continue to ensure that we are out and about and doing really meaningful work and partnering with our school districts and communities. Kimber, I know I left out many examples. What would you like to add to that?
Well, thank you for having us. I'm Kimber Van Est, Chair of the Department of Education, and really appreciate your time and your invitation. I agree that it is our responsibility. So I think it's okay to throw that out there. So we do a number of outreach activities to fulfill that responsibility beyond all of our hundreds of hours of practicum experiences and the student teaching. So we routinely reach out to principals and superintendents and ask them what they need from us and how we could do better with our educator preparation program. We host administrators and educators to come on campus and talk to us about what's going on in the schools and what they think we could do better to meet their needs. We have had some really fruitful conversations about starting grow your own programs or starting residency internship types of programs where our students might be even have access to homestays in rural communities to be able to be more integrated. And we have also reached out to a number of schools and districts offering additional professional development around topic areas that they might be struggling with given the educator shortage. We also try to be responsive to those things. So it's one thing to have a responsibility to be there, and it's another thing yet again to do something about what we learned from being there. And we have changed some of our programming as a result of the information that we get back from our community partners. So we very much agree and want to be a service to the area and the state in that way. I see it as central to the mission.
Absolutely. And I'll just add, you've probably heard of, it was recently renamed or in the last few years, but UVM's professional and continuing education area, which used to be called continuing and distance education. And we have been working to think about ways we can use PACE, the shorthand, as an arm of our college to, again, reach in-place teachers or teachers who need retooling or people who want to enter the teaching field after they've done other things. So we're currently launching or preparing to transition our master's program in special education to within a couple of years, a fully online program to help extend our reach. So we do take those roles very seriously, and I think it's absolutely critical to the university's place in this state.
And growth and development. We've, in relationship to literacy, we've moved our program that is a literacy specialist coaching program to meet the needs of the state. We've moved that to be online, so it has greater accessibility to more people.
Professor, could you speak a little bit, maybe get a little closer to your computer? We don't hear you quite as well as we hear Professor Shepard.
Sure. How is this? Testing 1, 2.
It's a little better.
A little better?
It's better.
I think I've got my mic all the way up. How about now?
Okay, it's better. Good.
All right. We have also moved our literacy coaching, literacy specialist program for that coursework to be online so that it's more accessible to greater numbers of individuals in the state who may not be within driving distance. That's another example, I think, of how important this is to us.
When do teacher candidates enter the classroom generally?
They generally enter the classroom in their freshman or sophomore year, depending on if they're a first-year student coming in brand new, or if they are a transfer student. So we have an early and often model that we use.
Great. Committee, other questions, please, Senator Weeks.
So curiosity question, I know that your prime focus is undergraduate and graduate level education, but you both mentioned professional development, and I'm wondering kind of what, how you view your role in professional development and how immersed you are in the state schools on providing professional development that may be necessary to maintain licenses or what have you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're quite engaged from the standpoint that we do have, many of the students who graduate from our graduate programs or certificate programs are coming back to refresh their knowledge or to gain new skills. So we're certainly engaged that way. We, as I mentioned, we're looking for new opportunities to the professional and continuing education area of the university. I think this is another growth area for us, though, quite frankly. And, I don't want to use the pandemic as an excuse, but it's certainly, the pandemic was a time when we had to sort of shrink back inwards and make sure we could get everyone in our programs through under unusual circumstances. So we find ourselves now turning back outward and looking for more opportunities. So again, I think this is something we look forward to building out and would look forward to partnering with some others. Sometimes it's a challenge for us because our full-time faculty who are engaged with our degree programs are pretty busy folks, but I think we certainly have many contacts in the field that we can partner with to provide increasingly robust professional development opportunities.
I would add generally that the professional development connection comes from the field to us more often than vice versa. So although we push out and do some offerings, generally it's school sites themselves that say, we would like additional professional development in X, Y, or Z, math methods, reading, behavior management. And I think we're very open to providing that individually through faculty or through a department.
And I'll just add one other thing, which I failed to mention earlier, because it's not really quite as specific to teacher licensure, but we have a couple of outreach centers, one focused on social work practices in the Division of Children and Families, but our area that focuses on disability and community inclusion, the CDCI, that center provides a lot of direct outreach to schools through the I-Team, which the state funds. That's a team that services students with more significant disabilities. And so there's a certain level of more targeted interventions and outreach that we do through those couple of service and outreach areas.
as well as some institutes. And then our research teams, our faculty and tenure track lines and lecturers and senior lecturers are often engaged in research in the schools, and intervention work or training on new methods and new practices often involves professional development through their work to get grants from the federal government to provide services to schools.
This has been incredibly helpful. We very much appreciate it. I'm looking around to see if there are any additional questions. We look forward to continuing this conversation. If you find yourselves in Montpelier, please let us know. We'd love to
Yes.
see you in person. And if we find ourselves at the University of Vermont, we will certainly be in contact. But if anything comes up in your work over the next, several months, please let us know if we can be helpful. We're about to shift now to understand what we're doing for those teachers who may be graduating with debt. What can we do to help them? We're talking about this in the context of a Teach in Vermont campaign. And so we appreciate your partnership in any way, shape, or form. So thank you both for everything you do for Vermont and for the UVM students. We really, it doesn't go unnoticed, please.
Thank you. Well, and thank you so much. And to your last point, yes, count us in. We want to be part of that discussion. We absolutely believe that, the teaching profession in this country has got to make it easier for teachers to get an education, a high quality education, and not to end up with lots of debt, only to go into a profession that we don't yet pay people as much as they should be paid to do. So we're behind you on that one for sure, and really eager to talk to you in the future. And we will come to Montpelier. We both had rather full schedules today and couldn't manage that.
Oh, no, that wasn't
No, not
don't
not
get me wrong,
taking
I give digs sometimes. That wasn't a dig, I promise.
No,
you.
I didn't feel, no.
Yeah, we'd love to see you either on Zoom or in person. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Bye-bye.
We're happy to do so. Thank you.
thank you. Ms. Cargill, you're our, what's the expression?
My batting
Your
cleanup.
batting cleanup. Thank you so much. And I know you have a presentation.
So I wasn't even going to present. I
Yeah,
wanted
please,
to provide you with the talking points I'm going to speak from. Thinking kind of broadly to a bigger question of how do you reduce the debt that students have, especially for these teachers that you're interested in. And I think the first thing you do when you're trying to reduce debt is you're trying to provide enough non-debt financial aid that they
Yeah.
don't have to take out loans. So that's kind of the starting point. But when you're thinking about, Marilyn Cargill, Vermont Student Assistance Corporation.
You're so famous, you don't even need to.
You know,
It's
I
like
know
watching-
better than that. Apologies to all of you. So you've got your grant programs, your scholarship programs, and you've got your forgivable loan programs. Those are all what I would consider access programs. That's what gets students who are thinking about going to college into school.
Yeah.
And certainly, Senator Campion, that the legislature for the last few years has put a lot of emphasis on those forgivable loan programs. The way a forgivable loan program works is that you are making an obligation to work in a specific field within the state of Vermont for a specific amount of time in exchange for an amount of money that acts as a scholarship if you fulfill the work obligation and becomes a loan if you do not. Those programs, and I'm going to show you on the next slide, we've got a number of those going right now. Those programs can work really well for that student that knows exactly what they're going to do. So we find, for example, that 85% of our nursing students who use forgivable loans repay them with work obligation. That's exactly what we're looking for. There's always some percent that end up moving out of state or doing something different and don't repay them with work obligation. And then there's some who are in the wrong major. And they may take one of these forgivable loans and realize this is not the right path for them. One of the questions I would have asked if I had had a chance, and I knew this was not my opportunity to ask questions, but I may reach out to your
Always, if you are sitting there, please know if there's something, yeah.
But I'm curious how many students start in education as a major and change their majors? Because that's when forgivable loans become, dangerous is way too big of a word, but they become more difficult, because if you take a full tuition forgivable loan for $18,000 or $20,000, and then you also are given your federal Stafford loans, your direct loans, that student's got an awful lot of debt that they're carrying. And if they're doing that for 4 years and then make a different decision, they're in way worse position than they would have been without that forgivable loan, just from how much debt are they now carrying. So sometimes the way that you can adjust for that is perhaps forgivable loans come in their juniors and senior years when they've had an opportunity. I loved their comments about, we use a frequent in the classroom, start early and do it frequently. I loved that, to hear that, because I think you know sooner whether maybe you're on the right path or the wrong path for you. But some states do hold off. We don't on any of the programs we have in Vermont right now, but in some states, they do hold off on awarding them until later in the program, which reduces overall debt, but it doesn't necessarily increase the number of people in the pipeline that are going to become teachers. So there's a yin and a yang to those options. Grants and scholarships are the easiest way for students, but they don't lock them into that work obligation, which I think, again, the legislature has found really attractive as a way to increase our workforce.
What if we started a fund, a public-private partnership where the legislature and some private industry had a fund that was either an opportunity fund for teachers or a way to actually, let's say you've been teaching a couple of years, put some guidelines around it to start to reduce some of that debt. I mean, it's such a big deal. We're not talking about people that are going to be able to leave and make a ton of money, at any stage, really. This is the career that they want.
Absolutely. So the other program I just wanted to mention that VSAC is administering, it was created last year in the legislature, and we work on this with the UVM Office of Engagement, and that is a loan repayment program. And what this one is, this is about actually recruiting teachers and keeping your grads in Vermont. And the way that program works, and we're standing it up right now, students will be able to apply for it this coming spring as they graduate, is if someone chooses to work in Vermont in a field that we've identified, the current one is not that, but you certainly could do it for teaching, and they live and work in Vermont, that you're willing to forgive or pay back a certain percent of their loan. It could be a percent, it could be a solid dollar amount. The UVM program that we're just standing up is going to pay $5,000 of student loan debt for a 2-year commitment to living and working in Vermont. It doesn't matter what the field is, but the field must require a bachelor's degree. So you have to graduate this spring from a Vermont college. You must be getting a job that requires the degree, not necessarily the one you got, because as we all know, I'm a biology major, and I needed a degree to get the job, but I didn't need to be a biology major to do it. But you have to have at least a job that requires a degree. So that's another tool that potentially you use. One is going to attract people who are already teachers, and the grants and scholarships and loan forgiveness is really about encouraging more students to go into their educational career path of education. One is teachers that are already trained, and one is 4 years from now, the first teacher would step out type of thing. They would be through their 4-year degree.
Senator Williams.
Didn't we have a program like that, but it was for come to Vermont, move here and work here, and we'll pay, what, $10,000?
Yeah.
I mean, is did that sunset?
That's a great question.
Because it's kind of like what you're talking, except you've added education. So
I'll ask Senator Romero, do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer, but I mean, I was just going to comment that I think that program, but making it a bit more specific and saying, here's 10 grand if you're in one of these professions, you know, one of these 5 or 6 professions that are sorely needed. And you can have this 10 grand if you stay here for a couple of years, or making it incremental where, you know, they're here for 2 years, they get 2 grand. They're here for another 2 years, they get another 2 grand of that 10K. That way you can avoid people coming in for 6 months, getting their 10 grand and being like, all right, going to New York now.
Make it much more strategic.
it was 10 grand, five grand a year.
5 grand a year.
Yep, that's what they got. So, but it would take a marketing dimension to it.
Yeah.
If we're gonna be attracting people from outside the state.
So the very next slide I have just shows you the workforce development funding that we're currently running out of VSAC. And what I wanted you to see was the interest-free forgivable loans that are currently set up. So there's one for early childhood education, nursing, the trades. The Vermont National Guard has one that's not specific to their major. It is specific to them working in the Guard. And then there is one for the Vermont dentist, and there's also one for primary care physicians. And in that one, you do have to be a junior or a senior at the UVM College of Medicine, and you're agreeing, and this is a long ways out, but when you finish school and your residency, that you will return to work in Vermont.
Could you provide us, and it kind of looks like it's on page 4, but I'm not just what the teachers are doing. Could you just send us a document, if you're a teacher, what the opportunities are for you to sort of come back?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So if you skip over to page, if you look at page 5 right now,
Okay,
you have full-time and part-time Vermont state grants through VSAC that you can
okay,
apply for.
yeah.
If
But I
there,
need to know the scratch.
you want to know what the dollar
I want
amounts
to know
are?
the dollars. Because,
So
yeah,
the dollars of full-time and part-time, first of all of the programs that we run for the state of Vermont are need-based programs. So
Yeah.
families have to show financial need. But a grant at UVM would range between $1,000 for a upper middle income family to as much as $7,000 for a low income family. The private scholarships that we run, as you know, those are coming from foundations. We talked about this when I was here a little while ago, endowments. The state has some. There's 7 that specifically are for education. But again, I will just say the majority of those programs, I shouldn't say the majority, at least half of those are for our early childhood educators. There's such a focus last year on creating funding for early childhood education. And then the only forgivable loan that we're currently running for education is also for early childhood education.
could you just run for us, no rush, maybe get next week, teacher, the middle to low income Vermonter that graduates from UVM or the state colleges, the real possibility of what he or she may be able to get. And then on the other side, the early childhood educators, just so we can see, hey, they're gonna max, somebody could get up to 20,000, or is the max 1,700, you know, just so I can really get my head around these numbers.
Sure,
That would be great.
I can do that.
Because when we talk to a PROPS, you know, it'll be helpful to see if we really do need something else. And in that, how much money are we realistically giving out? Is it one kid every year is gonna get a $25,000 and then he or she stays around? Or really, are we really reaching 100 teachers potential teachers every year. So that's what I'm wanting to talk to Senator Kitchell about, and that would be helpful if I could get that.
Sure. The other thing we can do, Senator Campion, if you would like us to, and we did this with the nursing, was we kind of went with amounts of money. If there was $1 million and you wanted to pay full tuition up to UVM's tuition, how many students can you have? If you're trying to do UVM and the state colleges, are we trying to do every college in Vermont? Because as you know, when we get into the private schools, whether we would pay full tuition or we cap it at what we would pay at UVM, for example. That's something that we do with some of these other forgivable loans. So if you as a committee have some thoughts on what you'd like to do or how you might like to structure something, then we can model that for you and tell you roughly what would happen there.
Okay. But this would be a great start, just to.
Yeah,
for us to
absolutely. We'll work
get
on
those
this
numbers
first.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we can go from there. Questions?
Just a small comment that I support the idea of trying to make this a bit more robust to apply to more people and keep people in the state. So, yeah, priority of mine.
Yeah.
Me too.
I also think, that there could be something out there from private industry. I'll be honest, I really do. I think everybody has kids, a lot of people have kids in school. I have a 6-year-old beagle, but most people have kids in school. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, that was great. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, you are so welcome.
always-
And as always, my contact information is on that last page.
Yeah.
If you have questions, please reach out to us.
And I'll have Hayden send you an email about next week, either just zooming in and just walking us through the